All right. Hi, members. We are here with Erik Hartman, and we are going to discuss genetic engineering and artificial intelligence today. We are very excited. This is a topic that we have long looked forward to discuss in depth, and we we've we've worked hard to get to this point, and we're very excited to have this discussion. So today we are here with Derek Beckedal, the founder and the chair of the AISS, David, and he's more than just secretary and transformation officer. All of this was his initiative, and we are very excited to hear all about his visions. And then myself, who is vice chair and also a founder, and then most important, Erik Hartman. And Erik Hartman is all the way from Sweden. He's very, very impressive. He's doing biomedical engineering. It's something that I always wanted to do. And he has been awarded the most prestigious award at the Sweden National Science Competition for Youth, the third award at Intel ISEF in 2018, and a gold medal at IGEM 2019. Erik, we are very impressed and very proud to have you here. You are actually our very first international speaker for this podcast, and we are honored to have you here. Can you maybe explain to us a bit more about what you've done, what you've accomplished, and tell us a bit more about Synthethics?
Sure. Well, I'm terribly honored to be here as well. I think this is a fantastic initiative that you guys have started, and I'm just excited to have this discussion. So a little bit about me. As I said, I'm from Sweden, and I've always kind of had an interest in science. But in high school, I started doing science competition, and I started getting actually like more involved in scientific research, which led me to then compete, as you said, in the Swedish national science competition for youth, where I was awarded the most prestigious prize and managed to get myself to Intel ISEF, which is an international competition. It's kind of like a massive science fair, very, very American, very extravagant, very busy, very big. And that was, of course, something that just sparked the flame even more for me in science. And then going on to university, I decided that I wanted to study biomedical engineering. I kind of always wanted to study medicine, but at that point, I just couldn't give up math and physics. I just couldn't become, a physician, medicine doctor, or something like that, because then I would never have touched on like statistics or programming or anything like that. And I just couldn't do it. So I went on to biomedical engineering, and then I started a double degree in biomedicine as well to get more of the biomedical and more chemistry side. And then, as you said, I went on to kind of delving into synthetic biology. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to study and do research in some kind of biology field. But synthetic biology just sounded really, really interesting to me, being a completely new field of science, delving into genetic engineering. And so I joined our university's IGEM team. So IGEM is this massive competition, originally hosted by MIT in Boston, but now it's an independent organization where a bunch of different universities create projects in synthetic biology, and then they compete. So we did a project. And during that project, I started Synthethics, having an interest in kind of the philosophical side and the legislative side of synthetic biology. And kind of that's also where my interest in artificial intelligence started, looking at their existential risks that, completely powerful AIs give and so on. And then we managed to do really well in IGEM. And from there on, Synthethics just kind of went on after my time in IGEM. And right now, we launched just in June, and we have over 20 ambassadors worldwide. And we're starting to get into the field of, having an organization that actually deals with questions that have some kind of realistic implication on the world and some real implications on the world. So, that's kind of my background.
That's a mouthful. If you can explain to us just a bit more about what synthetic biology really is, and what it entails and what the future of that will be.
Yeah, sure. So synthetic biology is a very interdisciplinary field. It's mainly based on biology and genetic engineering, and it's using these tools that the genomic era gave us in, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, where we started to tampering with genomes, we started to understand and start to sequence genomes much, much quicker and much, much cheaper than before. And then a couple of people, mostly based at MIT, they started thinking about how can we systematically create like different types of organisms with synthetic genomes to do things that we want and that we humans kind of thrive on. So being a new field, they decided they wanted to do it similar to how programming is a research field. It's kind of open source and very standardized. So they started synthetic biology and introduced something called biobricks, which are like standardized parts. And they also introduced a catalog, which you can kind of imagine to be like the syntax of a programming language. They have this syntax of how different biobricks can fit together. And then that kind of all blew up because it was so easy to understand the syntax and so easy to engineer bacteria and yeast and stuff like that. So a lot of students started doing it. And then this iGEM competition started. And since then, it's just been a field that has kind of exploded in the research world because it's so easy to conduct research and so easy to do new things. So you can be like students, there are high school students conducting research in synthetic biology and doing amazing things. And it's all thanks to this very engineering approach with a simple syntax and a common language and a very web-based kind of approach.
Yeah. Would you say the syntax that you guys are using now? I think this is where artificial intelligence actually will come in nicely, because obviously the human genome is, I don't know the number, but there is a lot of genes in our genome. And I know that the computing power of traditional computers today, I don't believe that it will be able to process all the various possibilities. Is that true?
I can tell you now that, I can tell you now, the current computers we have will not be able to simulate all the possibilities. Just from the bit of physics that I have, I think trying to simulate more than 4 particles interacting with each other is impossible. We don't have enough computing power to do that.
Wow.
I might be wrong on the number, but I know it's an exceptionally small number of particles.
So how does it actually work then? If you want to program the synthetic biology when the traditional computers are so limiting?
Yeah, so as you said, the human genome is massive. It's between 20,000 and 30,000 genes. And what makes the human genome so difficult to interpret is because there are so many layers of involvement and so much within the genome. We have genes that code for RNA, that codes for protein, and the proteins decide kind of what genes are to be transcribed. And then we have also RNA that has some transcriptional power. So it's like a massive loop of recursion. And that's kind of, people are saying that our genome is very simple and very, and kind of small compared to other organisms. But what they don't see is how many layers of recursion we have within our genome. And that's what makes it so difficult. So I think modeling and using artificial intelligence to kind of model a complete genome, that's borderline impossible. So that's kind of why synthetic biology uses a more trial and error approach. It's a lot of using like simple, you know what a plasmid is?
No.
I'll explain that then. Okay, so then a plasmid is kind of a circular type of DNA that bacteria have. So some very important stuff they like to keep in plasmids, because I can send you a plasmid and I can get a plasmid from you. So, for example, if there's an antibiotic resistant gene that codes for a protein that gives you antibiotic resistance to some specific antibiotic, they like to keep those in plasmids to be able to trade it off to other bacteria and they pick them up from dead bacteria and stuff like that. So usually in synthetic biology, we don't actually incorporate stuff into the big chromosomal DNA. We just create the plasmid and we give it to the bacteria. So that's why in synthetic biology, we just put a few genes in a plasmid with some kind of theoretical background for what those genes actually do. And then we measure things in the lab. We see, are the proteins expressed that we want them to, in the ways that we want them to be? Are they doing the things that we want them to do? And this is also where the interdisciplinarity of synthetic biology comes in, because doing so in a lab is kind of difficult, because measuring stuff in a lab when it's so tiny, so it's really hard to measure things. But then it's nice to just model these kind of simple systems. So how fast are we going from gene to protein, and how effective are our proteins? That's just a bunch of differential equations which you can model fairly easily. But of course, these models are estimates because we can't model the entire system. So often we have to match our models with what we measure in the lab. So that's kind of what we do instead of trying to model the entire genome.
So is it correct then to say, you can correct me, but it's a plasmid? So is it correct then to say, if you as the biomedical engineer, you want to test something, you have a goal, you want to test whether this plasmid information will actually give the result of what you want to accomplish. But in order to do that currently, there is a big process behind that. You would have to do a lot of extensive research, or you have to work in the laboratory. And if there's any human error, you would have to start all over. And that is where artificial intelligence can come in, because it can train from all the errors that we made, all the successes that we made, and then it can kind of interpret where to go. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. That's conducting synthetic biology is both really, really difficult, as I said, because you have to be in the lab and actually get the expression of a certain protein, and it's very tedious work. But at the same time, it's really, really simple, because you can order these genetic parts from a company probably that's based in your country. We have tons of these different companies, and you can do it in a normal lab. So in a way, it's really difficult. But in a way, it's also really, really easy, which is why synthetics kind of deals with, well, what happens if it's too easy, and if we actually get some really good models that can develop, synthetic bacteria or synthetic viruses that are made as weapons and actually used for bioterrorism and things like that. But that's definitely an application of AI, is to kind of try to predict and create the best biobricks and the best genetic parts to be able to have a successful experiment.
So, am I correct in saying that it's similar to what pharmacists are doing, where they use AI to try and kind of predict what chemicals will, predict the reaction pathways and what chemicals will be beneficial, and then in order to reduce the number of experiments that they have to go and do in the lab. So the AI system will kind of narrow it down, ideally basically give them one thing, but currently no AI system is 100% perfect, but it at least significantly reduces the number of experiments that need to be done in the lab.
Yeah, that's some predictive power that you can have by using computer models, and it's really quick and easy. There's no wet lab, it's just dry lab, just a computer. No harm done, kind of. But also, in kind of a similar manner, you can model how your synthetic bacteria or virus or synthetic organism will behave in an environment. So in a new environment, I won't be able to create a realistic environment in the lab, or at least it will be very difficult to be able to, kind of synthesize a maze field, an artificial maze field in my lab, where if I let out bacteria with a complete ecosystem, I can see what actual implications on that ecosystem is. So I definitely think that as we gain more computing power and as we get more experience in the behavior of synthetic organisms and the behavior of ecosystems, we will be able to use predictive power to actually see if some synthetic organisms will be safe in an environment in which we are selected out in.
So
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I also have a question, but go Dave.
Oh, so I was gonna say, we are focused on right now. We're busy talking about what we want to do with this synthetic technology power that we have, and also merging it with artificial intelligence power that we already have right now. But do we also think about or consider, like after creating this technology? I know you mentioned something about somebody using this synthetic technology powered for bioterrorism, right? Are we considering that what if after developing this technology, maybe reaching the AGI level, the terrorizer basically, is it going to be a person or is it going to be the system that we have given the data to? Because now we are enabling it basically with the power, enough intel to kind of have control over the population, and then it can be the one that released that bioenergy or that bio disease or whatever, bacterial or whatever it is, and then it starts the pandemic as a system, not a human. So do we consider the danger being the artificial intelligence that we have already developed, or is just going to be focused on humans?
I would say that there is definitely, that's more in the artificial intelligence field, because synthetic biologists are not really concerned with what an artificial intelligence will do with that technology, although I think that they definitely should be. But definitely, like an artificial intelligence, especially now when we are delving into the kind of era of cloud laboratories, I think that students 50 years from now will be like, what, did you use pipettes with your hands? That's stupid. Like, why didn't you just code it into a cloud lab? And of course, if someone managed to hack into an AI, or if we have an AI with kind of an ambiguous goal set in mind, and it's all of a sudden thinks that the best thing that it could do is to release a highly contagious and highly deadly virus that it synthesizes in a lab because it has full access to that lab. In fact, it is the only thing that has access to that lab. Then we are quite in a pickle. It's like that will definitely be the end of most intelligent life on Earth.
But in terms of who to place the blame on, if that's in such a situation, that is a very tricky one.
Yeah.
Because the discussion I had a while ago, it's a similar concept to like self-driving cars. If the self-driving car has an accident, is it the manufacturer of the car? Is it the company that put it all together? So is it the hardware manufacturer, the company that combined the whole system? Is it the company that provided the trained system? Is it the programmer who wrote the system for training? Is it the people who provided the data to train the system? Or is it the owner of the vehicle? So it can go on forever in terms of who the blame lies on. Yeah, sorry, Llewellyn, you had a question, and then I just want to go back to
that brings a very interesting topic, because let's say this Stradios or online research centers, basically, just for anybody who doesn't know, and Erik, you can just correct me, but it is basically, it's a cloud laboratory. So we can sit here in South Africa or Sweden and perform a lab test somewhere in the world, either in Australia or America or wherever, because of the automation. And it's basically a lab which is fully automated. There is no humans involved, and it performs tests from all around the world. But now my question actually comes in, when you apply machine learning to that, to the Stradios, to the online laboratories, and the machine learning is kind of learning how to perform these tests, and it becomes merged with a quantum computer, which will really allow it to assess all the possibilities in a very shorter period of time. Now, my question comes in that if that system becomes an artificial general intelligence, and that will basically serve as the humanity, the brain of humanity to perform all experiments. And I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that is bad. Because on the one hand, you will have this immense computing power from the quantum computer. You will have excellent thoughts or software from the AI side, and you will allow that to perform experiments that can affect us directly. And if there's one mistake, even statistically, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And that, I don't know if I move in that direction, but like my inner self who loves technology and progress and development, I want to go there, but I'm not sure when I get there, I want to be there.
Yeah, I think in a way, the question of, should we have cloud-based laboratories if we manage to produce an AGI is kind of, it doesn't really matter, because an AGI will find a way to produce, it will kind of find ways to do whatever it wants in a sense. So, and I definitely agree with you. I think that any progress after we made an AGI, it won't be done by humanity. Like the AGI will be the last invention that humans will have to create. And after that, it will just be up to the AGI. And I think that's kind of sad. And just like you, I definitely think, like, I want to be a part of that, but I kind of want to be really close to where I'm like, I'm almost dead. It's like I get to see it and then I'm out. It's kind of so, but yeah. So I definitely understand your concern, and I think that goal characterization and goal specificity in times like when creating an AGI is absolute key. And that's another reason why I got interested in looking into artificial intelligence, because goal characterization is so key.
Just if I can comment on what you were saying about kind of wanting to be in the AGI era but not wanting to be.
Right.
Well, that just gave me the idea of kind of, we should create an AGI but just like stick it on another planet as a almost like an experiment in a petri dish. We just have the AGI on another planet, make sure it can't leave, and we just leave it there and observe and see what happens. Maybe that would be actually the best way to go about an AGI. So if we think we've got an AGI, let's drop it on Mars, because we're already planning to go there. So we drop it on Mars, see how it behaves. If it's too violent, then we just don't go back there.
Okay, but hear me out. So when we do actually have the computational power for such a powerful AGI, why don't we just put it in a simulation? Simulate the world, let that be step one. And then within that simulation, because we have this powerful computing, then we just let the AGI train there. And then it's like, okay, world scenario 1, world scenario 2, world scenario 3. And I don't want to dig into, are we living in a simulation? I don't want to go there. But, I think that's maybe a better way to control that. If you do have all the data that physically available, and then you simulate. Oh, David.
Imagine doing that, right? And then it's basically like us. We feel like we live in a simulation as humans. But look at what we've already done. Killed each other. We have lied to each other, committed crimes against each other. Now imagine that AI breaks free from that simulation. Imagine the dangers that will carry, because now you've placed it in a situation where it has to run on testing. We're testing if it's growing good or it's growing bad. We're testing if it's behaving in a less good manner or it's behaving perfectly. And then if it breaks free with having opinions, with having choices, more of like a humankind, imagine the danger it will carry after it breaks free. Because just like a child, it's exposed to a new world. It wants to test everything. That system also will want to test a lot of things, and then we might be the test experiment, the test objects, and that is not good. It's like
I mean,
basically, yeah, go on.
yeah, I definitely agree with you, David. And I think many of these scenarios are brilliantly explained by the Oxfordian philosopher Nick Bostrom. I don't know if you've heard about him or read about him, but he deals with existential risks and has been involved in artificial intelligence, also a little bit of biotechnology side, but mostly in artificial intelligence for the past, I think, 15 years. And he's like one of the leading philosophers in like existential risks and AGI philosophy. So he has a lot of these scenarios, these kind of black box scenarios, like put it on Mars or put in a black box on Earth where you can't see anything. But then it's like, how do we observe it? To observe it, we have to have kind of a way in. And if it's an AGI that's, unfathomably intelligent compared to us, then it will find a way to get out. So I like one way of controlling this. If an AGI wants to get out of a black box, is to give it an Ethernet cable, or kind of something similar to an Ethernet cable, but connected to the Ethernet cable is just a kill switch. So it's just, if it tries to connect to that Ethernet cable, kill the AI. But then we're also in kind of a dilemma, because, well, if an AGI is so unfathomably intelligent, then it will know that Ethernet cable is not real, and it won't go Ethernet cable, and it will act all nice and until we actually try to investigate it. So I think everything we're trying to go ahead.
Yeah. So what you said, if we do have that setup with the Ethernet cable as a kill switch, if it is true AGI and we're observing it, I feel like it would learn it kind of, well, we never observe it through the Ethernet cable, so there must be something about something not right about it. Like no channel of communication, no exit path through that Ethernet cable, because it's never observed through it.
Yeah, the idea is that you have the Ethernet cable to just like let it sit in that black box for a week. If it's ever gone through if it ever tried to go through the Ethernet cable, then kill it. Otherwise, open up the black box and look and see what's actually in there.
Yeah, like similar to Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
So
sorry, just if you can remember that thought, Dave. Just before I forget, just want to go back to what you were saying, Llewellyn, in terms of simulating the world in order to kind of see how the AGI behaves. I feel like the AGI would need to be trained, and in training, one of the ways of possibly training the AGI would be to simulate the world. So kind of I don't quite think your idea of like simulate the entire world and just drop it in to see how it reacts would work, because you would use the world to train it to be an AGI.
But that brings us back to the question, which came first, the egg or the chicken? It's like in an ideal world, we would have a world to simulate. But seeing our artificial intelligence is currently progressing, the only places where it's not the only, most of the places where it's progressing is in the military, in academic centers, and in companies. And I believe that only academic centers really are concerned with the ethics of all these things. Like the military, I doubt that they are very concerned about. They are mostly just concerned about developing an AGI that is powerful enough and can give them power. And companies develop these AGIs purely to sell us stuff. It's programmed, this artificial general intelligence. The entire purpose of this AGI is just to sell us stuff. So even if that becomes smarter and as David mentioned earlier, artificial super intelligence, would we want that? Like, would we want to have this super salesperson?
Yeah.
So
Something that has just occurred to me now while you were speaking: would the military actually want AGI? Because AGI would be
Oh, that's a good question.
If we, I suppose, okay, this now starts becoming philosophical in terms of how you define what AGI is. But AGI would, I think the general consensus is it would be able to think for itself. And military would want someone kind of, you give it an order and it says yes, no questions, and just executes it. Whereas if it's AGI, it could question kind of, well, do I want to do this? So
Well,
in
That's
that
why I
sense,
wanted to get to this 2 points,
yeah,
first of all. So first thing I want to mention is to clarify these levels of artificial intelligence. As I've mentioned to you guys before, we have the artificial narrowed intelligence. That's what you are talking about right now, Derek. Like you basically said, the military can have this kind of artificial intelligence technology where you can basically give it instructions and it will follow without question.
yeah.
That's
So
the technology we have today,
yeah, so it's AI for a specific task. Is that what?
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then we
Like
have artificial.
genetics that's currently happening.
Yeah, and then we have artificial general intelligence. That's the current fear we have. That's actually the current fear we think we have, because we have futuristic thoughts about what this technology might do. But actually, that thought of trend, that thought of trend we have right now is about artificial super intelligence. That's the most. That's the one we should have fear the most about, because when we reach that level, that's basically the point of no return. I mean, that technology is not at the human capacity thought level. Basically, it's not thinking as a human, it's thinking above a human. So we
so,
right now are achieving the intelligence of, we are basically focused on AGI, which is basically human capacity or human level thought that a technology might have. But when we get to super intelligence, it's over. There's nothing we can do.
but another question then is it possible to have AGI without, so AGI without ASI, so artificial general intelligence without artificial super intelligence? Because if we make a good enough AGI, one could argue that it's smart enough to grow and become super intelligence.
Yeah, it
Similar
would have to be.
yeah.
I have a proposal probably, but so Erik and Derek, I think you guys can argue about this for a very long time. But okay, so with genetic coding, okay, so from a genetics point of view, you have your A, G, T, and C. Okay, that's how you program. And then you get an organism as a result. Okay, and artificial intelligence, AGI, ASI, AI, is also just coding, but it's binary. It's only with ones and zeros if you go to the root of what programming is. Now, what I'm thinking is, how about if you can code an AGI with A, G, T, and C?
But yeah, and I think quantum computing is it's well on its way to get there, because there you have the 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1 combinations. So then you're actually getting close to having A, T, C, and G. What's also worthy to mention is that the genome is more than just A, T, C, and G. It's a bunch of modification. There's even some Watson and Crick base pairing. So Watson and Crick came up with the ATCG, but we have different versions of this. But then, yeah, exactly as you say, if we have a strong enough intelligence, an AGI that would then become a super intelligence or similar, then that could definitely be simulating and modeling complete genomes, and including the epigenetic effects and including everything like that. And I think that's also why we're delving into the realm of simulations, because how many of these genomes can it code? And that also leads us to then, will that lead into consciousness? Like, will the beings and the organisms that it codes for be conscious? Because if you think about consciousness as just the informational kind of structure, then that would be consciousness as well. And yeah, there's a bunch of interesting implications that quantum computing and AGI in combination can lead to from a purely like biological perspective.
Just remember what you want to say. I just want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Very, very.
Go.
Okay, so what I'm going at is that the organism, so like the actual physical organism, is the software of an AGI. Is that
I think that would be a very inefficient way to create an AGI.
Yeah, because organisms are basically just energy. I don't know.
Kind of what you're saying is that we are then AGI.
Well,
Yeah,
we're just artificial.
Yeah.
In a sense, because we didn't create ourselves,
Yeah, but okay. My biology knowledge is terrible. But if I understood correctly, the DNA is made of an AG. You said A, G, T, and C.
Yeah.
But okay, Erik, you'll definitely know more about this than me. But it's not just how those are combined. Is there actual information associated with, so A, there's information associated with A, and with G, and with T, and with C. So kind of almost as the analogous to like when you want to you want to write a paragraph, your A, G, T, and C would be sentences. So the way you combine them affects your final paragraph.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the byte, like encoding with 8 digits is a byte, and if genetic,
but I'm getting this. So what you were saying, Llewellyn, then in terms of quantum computing, where you've got the zero, those 4 combinations, I don't think it would quite work as easily as you made it sound, because like the analogy, the transition from the quantum to the classical would turn that into a 0 or 1, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is nowhere near enough information that the A, G, T, or C would actually represent.
Exactly, and that's why I kind of put it in there that would be a terribly inefficient AGI, because you would have to have hundreds of bits to represent one base pair, because it can be modified in various ways. You can have mutations, and it will be constantly modified throughout its lifetime. So you have to store many bits for just one base pair. And I think that some people are talking about creating an AGI through simulation of biological brains or biological organisms. And I think that most artificial intelligence researchers are all in unison saying that this is a terribly inefficient way to create an AGI. Yeah.
I thought you said efficient.
No, unfortunately not.
So that makes sense.
Okay, this is, sorry, Dave, if you can just remember what you were going to ask. Going back like way back to the beginning. I know there's a field called computational biology, and I was just wondering, like, I think there's also bioinformatics. How are those related to synthetic biology?
Well, I mean, those are very broad fields and they definitely overlap. Actually, this summer, I've been doing research in the field of bioinformatics. I've been looking at the different small protein parts in different wounds. And that field of bioinformatics is just analyzing big data, using machine learning to learn on big sets of data and looking at like frequency analysis and stuff like that. So that can definitely be applied to synthetic biology. So computational biology and bioinformatics is kind of like coding, and then synthetic biology is like machine learning. So it's different applications to a smaller kind of sub area.
Okay, because the reason I was asking is because I come from a computational physics background. In computational physics, we basically the sort of experiments you might do in a lab, you just do on a computer.
Yeah. So I would say definitely that synthetic biology is more intertwined with computational biology because a lot of synthetic biology is modeling. And bioinformatics is more the analysis of big sets of data or applying machine learning and stuff like this. So computational biology, as of now, is very, very applied in synthetic biology.
Okay. Yeah, and I would imagine that people are starting to bring in AI techniques into the computational biology. Like by AI techniques, I mean more than just the ones for data mining.
Yeah, a lot more machine learning and more artificial intelligences and neural networks like these are being created. For example, if you want to try to predict if a small protein is sufficient in killing bacteria, we now have machine learning models based just on neural networks that can try to predict these kind of properties, this bactericidal, aka bacteria killing properties. So I think like these are being applied, although the biological kind of field and biologists in general aren't that good at coding. So it's taking a while for it to get integrated, but we're more and more seeing the integration of algorithms into just standard labs.
Yeah, I think it's certainly becoming a lot easier, and it's going to almost certain that it's going to be an exponential increase because most of the machine learning models and code and whatnot is all in Python. And my opinion on the reason for that is Python, you don't have to learn. It's a fairly basic language to pick up. You don't have to learn the fundamentals of computer science in order to use it. And so by making all these machine learning toolkits and models and all of that available in Python as pre-coded, it's allowing AI to be spread to a variety of fields. So that just so practitioners in, say, biology or physics or geography or whatever don't need to know AI and how it works, like how to actually make AI. They can just say, okay, well, let's just use this code, give it this data, and see what comes out. Sorry, Dave, you had a question, and then I've got one more question.
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment on that. Like, I felt like that's kind of when like you're explaining about using just Python, so it kind of gives people to the freedom to use their creativity to create whatever they want. It's just a comment on that.
And then one question more out of curiosity on my side than probably any relevance to this whole meeting. You said that they're using neural networks to predict like how proteins and things and viruses and whatnot will be affected. What I know that kind of you can't, if you get 100% accuracy with your neural network, you've probably got something wrong somewhere. I was just curious, what is there like a standard or an acceptable accuracy at which you say, yes, okay, this will work? Or is it more of a kind of intuition sort of thing?
Well, for just to pick an example that I can explain from, we'll say that we have a small peptide that is a part of a protein, and we want to try to predict if this will be efficient in hindering like the growth of bacteria or killing bacteria. So like a source of kind of infection dampening. So there's constantly new neural networks being developed in this area. The one that I used actually in my research this summer was published in March of 2020, and they're kind of constantly just hitting new benchmarks. The problem is that, as I said before, everything in biology is kind of interconnected, and we all have, and everything has this kind of symbiotic effect on one another. So really the only way to validate that your machine learning model actually works is to do an in vitro, that is in test tube testing of the bactericidal properties. So that's the state of the current application of machine learning. It's generating, or after you've done some in vitro testing or in vivo testing, to evaluate your model. So that's also an application that I think cloud labs will be great for, to do this mass testings of huge sets of data. So for example, in my research this past summer, we put about 5,000 small peptide sequences into this algorithm, and it's just spew out these are the most antibacterial, these are the least antibacterial. And so we kind of did just a cutoff value and said, okay, we trust everything above this number, but we could not validate this. So this is only our suggestion. And cloud laboratories could, if we had access to a cloud laboratory, we can then just put all of these into that cloud laboratory, synthesize these and test them on bacteria and give us the results. Because now we won't be able to test, 1,000 sequences in our own lab. That will take like a lifetime. So yeah, that's kind of the state of machine learning in bioscience.
So, okay, I may have then quite misunderstood. So it's not that you run your machine learning simulation, and it say you want to see how two proteins will interact. You feed it through your neural network. It says kind of, this is the result with 90% accuracy. Whereas if you do it this way, you'll get 50% accuracy. And so then you take the 90% accuracy one and then go and actually do it in the lab to see. Am I understanding that that's...
Yeah, that's kind of more like the methodology. Yeah, we don't completely trust any models right now. And from my knowledge, models with like protein-protein interactions, I've never seen the applications of models like them. Right now, we're just on the small peptide level or simpler interaction level.
Do you think that one day a complete simulation of the entire genome and any effect will be able to be simulated, so that we don't have to have labs?
I definitely think so. I think because this is just information. There's nothing, it's just information. You could model everything if you have a strong enough program. You could perhaps simplify models accurately enough if you apply machine learning that actually learns kind of the behaviors of systems without knowing the exact differential equations behind all of the influences of everything. And I think quantum computing is a great way to get there, speeding up the solving of huge differential equations. And asking a scientist on when something is going to happen, you will always hear in 50 to 70 years. But I will say in 50 to 70 years, this will happen. Or earlier. Yeah.
On that topic, when you like simulate genomes and that sort of thing, what I'm just trying to think how to phrase this that it doesn't sound purely physics. But basically, do you use quantum mechanics quantum mechanical theories to simulate it, or do you use classical?
So that's actually a pretty interesting question, because quantum mechanics in biological research is like a very new field. Like it barely has any practitioners. A lot of people have given theories on how quantum physics might give rise to free will and consciousness. But as for now, we're using just completely basic physics. It's simplifications all the way, and then doing some sort of just helping our models with the lab work. Like we can't model things completely without any lab work, at least in most cases.
Okay, because my thinking, I may be wrong about this, but my thinking was along the lines of like the size of genomes would be on a quantum scale, in which case using quantum simulation methods would be the way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Give you more accurate results.
Yeah, look up quantum biology. It's pretty cool.
Quantum biology. Damn.
So I'm assuming that they introduced that field because you say it's new. So I'm guessing they saw potential in it, and now they want to include it because they see that it might go far. But now the practitioners are not there because it's still a new field.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually born from what I know, it was born in trying to answer questions that had no solution, like, for example, the navigation birds have. So the birds navigation systems are, they're just kind of a black box for us. We have no clue about how it's done. But actually, some physicist was like, well, this could actually depend on, I can't remember exactly, but it was involving, the spin of particles in the Earth magnetic fields. And then this kind of gave rise to, well, actually, even some enzymes, even though enzymes are big, we have some macromolecules in the body that now have proven to have quantum mechanical properties, to be able to cross boundaries which it shouldn't be able to cross membranes and things like that. So actually it's a very new implementation, and it's just taking its baby steps, basically.
Yeah, I would say that a very large reason for it being still in its infancy is because to understand enough quantum mechanics, you got to go quite far in physics. But you've then got to go equally far in biology to apply the two.
Yeah.
But just what you were saying in terms of like the spin and magnetic field, I do know for a fact that the magnetic field, so all magnets, the electrons in them have a spin. And it's either an upspin or a downspin. And when the spins are all aligned, that's when you get your magnetic field from the object, from the magnet or whatever. So whoever came up with that theory of the spin in the brains was
something
on the right track.
Exactly. And they were actually then looking at if protein behavior differed when atoms in that protein had, or electrons and particles in that protein had a change of spin. So that was what they were looking at. And this is like way off of my comfort zone, but I just thought it was so cool.
Yes, but that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Like just to think of the macro changes that is caused by like quantum scale in biology. Like it's
Now I'm just thinking
comment on that.
Yeah, sorry, Dave, go.
So like I was thinking right now when you guys are mentioning that, like talking about the atoms of the protein, right? And then right now I was thinking, if in the field of bioengineering or genetics, now these people are considering using another element, a more robust element, to kind of counteract the creation of maybe, for example, synthetic skin or synthetic an artificial tissue in a way, basically. So would you guys in that field consider integrating your natural genomes with basically nanotechnology to kind of get to the field of where everything is just sufficient, and then the nanotechnology or the robots are basically programmed to do a specific job to interact in a specific way with your atoms, basically, that create a protein or create a tissue or whatever.
So how does nanotechnology link to genetic engineering? Because I am sure that there is a link.
Yeah, definitely.
Feels like
there are many links between nanotechnology and genetic engineering, and right now we're not really in the stage of nanotechnology where you can actually kind of tamper with the genome. Right now we're using kind of nature's own like homemade systems like CRISPR-Cas9 and systems like these. Yeah, these are systems that we find in either viruses or bacteria. And right now we're not really near designing any of our own, systems on the nanoscale that can go in and tamper within genomes. But I definitely think that kind of synthetic biology and nanotechnology usually go hand in hand, because it's a lot of, you can use bacteria in combination with nanotechnology to, as you say, create artificial skin or artificial tissues and things like this, especially like bioprinters. We can bioprint, specific organisms, and all of these kind of requires nanotechnology. So these are usually go hand in hand.
Would you be comfortable though with using nanotechnology in that field? Are you comfortable with it? Like, because I feel like it changes the whole definition of being a human.
Yeah, I would say that's the next level of medicine. I wouldn't say, like, if we use a molecule that we have found, for example, let's say we use ibuprofen. That's a molecule that we've just found in nature and we're using it. There's nothing wrong with designing another type of molecule or another type of system on the nanoscale and using that instead. It's kind of it's kind of a similar question relating to ethics now in synthetics. Are you comfortable with genetically modified crops? My response is often, well, if you can't tell which one is genetically modified, because you can just look at their genomes, you don't know which has been created through natural selection and which has been genetically modified. How do you even know what to be comfortable with? Like, they are just, the product is the same, it's just the methodology is different.
Yeah. My point of view on the ethics, like, I honestly feel, and I haven't given it too much thought, this is just my instinct, but at the end of the day, we are doing this in order to help civilization, in order to enhance what we currently have. We're not doing it to be malicious, like, okay. But like, when it becomes malicious, like the line between being good for humans and being bad for the environment there's a very fine line. But most of this, the intention is to be good for humans. And I don't know what the implications are for the environment, but I would assume that when that starts to get bad, like when bees can't go to flowers, and like, then it's bad. But yeah. Oh, okay, Derek, you have a question.
Okay. My question, going back to the whole nanotechnology and health and bioengineering, an idea that I had, and I want to know your opinion whether you think it would ever actually be feasible. Do you think we could ever get to a point where we have nanorobots that can be, say, injected into the bloodstream potentially with like cameras or sensors of some sort, that you can then use machine learning and train them to identify viruses and things like that? So they're in the bloodstream, essentially an AI nanorobot immune system.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool idea. And I definitely think it's possible with advances in nanotechnology. Although I like to bring kind of a synthetic biology view on kind of the same idea. And that is actually, instead of creating nanorobots that are tiny and then coded by an AI or uses AI or are encoded to actually find viruses or find bacteria or stuff like that, is to actually create an organism where you code it into its genome, because it's a much more kind of natural and simpler way to go about it. It requires, you can kind of use the nanotechnology that's inherent in nature, like the embryology and stuff like this. And this has actually been kind of conducted at MIT, I believe it was, creating artificial nanorobots that are synthetically based. So there's a cute little picture you can Google if you look at the synthetic nanorobot MIT. And it looks like it has 4 tiny small legs and it's kind of just waddling around. But it's a nanoscale biological robot that is used, but that is created from a synthetic biology perspective. So instead of actually wiring on a nano perspective, you're just letting it kind of go the more natural way. Let's call it that. Yeah.
Well, that just gave me another idea. I don't know if it would be feasible or not, but it sounds cool. Is an organic AGI with a limited lifespan that you can then give people, and it will go and hunt all the viruses and whatnot, and then after a while just die and get filtered out like normal.
Like an AGI poll.
Yeah. And no, but it's a living organism, so it's not like you're putting a circuit board into your body sort of thing. It's organic, so it can be filtered easily once it's dead.
Yeah, and these, like, you are thinking in the realm of synthetic biology right now. Like, these are the type of ideas that synthetic biologists deal with. And it's like, this is a great example of what I think synthetic biology is set out to do. And as we talked about before we went into nanobots, is that synthetic biology and biotech and AI, they will obviously have huge implications on MindCan. They have the potential to improve the welfare of humanity and to, definitely like shovel new grounds for us in any possible way, in happiness, in technological welfare, and it has so much potential. But what we at Synthethics set out to do is to actually make sure that we're not just pumping out research that has potential, but also has the potential to be used maliciously, but at the same time to kind of increase the resolution of ethics within biotechnology to be able to figure out what is good and what is bad, and not just draw everything, like brush away everything in the same stroke. And because that's kind of that's what's happening in the EU, and especially in the EU right now, is that we don't really have a high resolution regarding the legislation and the ethics of biotechnological research. So our goal is kind of, as identified kind of in this discussion, is to increase the resolution and to see like what should we do and what can be used maliciously, because I'm sure nanobots can be used maliciously as well. So increasing the resolution within these areas is definitely pivotal for us to ensure welfare in the future.
Yeah, I mean, just that idea that I came up with, it could be used maliciously in, rather than attacking viruses, it can attack organs, and if it's got a limited lifespan and decomposes, you'll never be able to pick it up.
Exactly.
And I hope when this gets uploaded, I haven't given anyone ideas. But
yeah, that's an interesting. That's the last thing you said is really interesting, because that's something that synthetic biologists kind of face is when talking about worries within biotechnology, are we giving ideas to bioterrorists?
Yeah.
So actually, when we at Synthethics, we published an article about bioterrorism. We had people in the iGen community responding to our article, saying like that we shouldn't be posting articles like these, because then we are giving ideas to people who wouldn't otherwise have thought about it. And my response to that is that we're actually doing more benefit by actually wanting to legislate things like these and wanting people to actually think about this, then we're providing some ideas for malicious psychopaths who probably would have thought of it otherwise as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, if you're not putting it out there,
But no one will know.
I mean, by putting it out there, yes, you can argue that you're giving people ideas. But if you don't put it out there, people could still come up with the ideas, as you say, and people won't be aware of it won't necessarily be aware of them as possibilities, so they can't kind of guard against it.
Yeah.
Just going back to your comment on EU and ethics, I read an article quite a while ago now. The EU, there's an AI center in the EU. I don't know if it's the center. Actually, I think you can possibly be corrected on this, but I think there's several countries in the EU that have signed an agreement focused on ethical use of AI, and China has also signed a similar document.
China.
Yeah.
I think that I know it's true, but I don't know the exact details of it. But I know there are agreements in the EU of how to use and that's how to use AIs, and that's also connected to the implementation of GDPR and things like that.
Yeah, I know America. If I remember correctly, America also signed one, but I looked at some of the things and it was so vaguely worded that they could get away. The EU and the China ones were part of the conditions were specifically about like military use and restricting that. The American one, the way it had been worded, I could see you can use it in military and still get out of it.
Yeah.
And still adhere to those conditions. But it's more basically what I wanted to mention is that there are quite big drives to push ethics in AI, which is a huge.
Erik, if I don't know, maybe it's not a good question, but will it take longer to design ethical prototypes, or will it actually not slow down the progress of research? Like, if everything that is being researched has to be ethical because anything that's been researched can be implemented, like will that take longer, like the timeline, or not really?
I can see different ways of implementation that will affect the burden of scientific research in different ways. For example, standardized protocols with a set policy, like if that would have been done 20 years ago, I don't think it would have impaired research today. But I can also see actually how it has the opposite effect, because today, as I said before, a lot of scientific inventions within synthetic biology are not legal and aren't able to be pushed into the market, even though that they are completely ethical and have done extensive safety testing. It's that the field is not defined enough for us to have a resolution high enough to be able to distinguish between different types of research. And I think that just doing some ethical analysis and increasing the resolution of legislation and of our actual ethical knowledge of what to do and what not to do will actually increase the rate of how research can be conducted and how it can be pushed out into the market and applied in different fields, and then have like kind of a snowballing effect. Right, yeah. But the EU and a lot of other things in research have a history of being extremely bureaucratic and hindering the from being done. The COVID-19 vaccine is one example of this, and diagnosing COVID-19 is one example of how bureaucracy can slow down research a lot. So I think it can be done in a good way and in a bad way.
Yeah.
If I can just comment on that question as well, Llewellyn, I think
Yeah.
in terms of how it would affect the time frame / speed progress. Can't remember the words you used exactly, but how it would affect the rate of research. That would very largely depend on how you define ethics and what protocols are in place that you have to go through before you can actually do research on something. If it's clearly defined and you don't have to do anything, then it won't affect it at all. If it's kind of vaguely defined and you've got to fill in like 50 documents and wait for a committee to agree to it and that sort of stuff, then obviously it will delay. So I think it's a valid question and an important one, but the answer unfortunately is very subjective.
No, no, it is very subjective, but also the way that I'm thinking is that by limiting people, and it's not very intuitive, but well, it actually is, but by limiting people and saying that you can only do research within these limits, like, and it's still broad enough to actually explore a lot, but you're limiting people. That actually will take away the dilution of research. Like everything will be concentrated, and that's why I'm actually asking the question. Because if the entire world is then focusing on this specific path of research or area of research, like it will speed things up because you will very and that actually links to the Stradios idea, like of having online research laboratories, because now everybody is on the same page with what to do and what not to do, and you can speed that process up. So maybe not 50, 70 years, maybe 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I've got two comments on that. One, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the expression, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Yeah, but it won't be one basket. It will just be like legs, if you know what I mean.
It'll be one basket, you're just making it a bigger basket.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that within nanotech field with synth bio, you know.
No, sorry. My understanding of what you were saying is kind of you put in regulations to say you can only research on this.
No, it's for a specific thing, just to have that ethical guidance. Like that will like make everybody focus on the same thing, because you can't focus on the unethical thing.
Right.
Yeah. That's something I have been thinking there should be some sort of legislation implemented, particularly with AI, because it can be, it has huge terrorism potential.
We don't want the smart people who understand AI to a different extent to actually work on stuff that either has no purpose or is malicious. Like we should make it legislation. Like, okay, you are smart. You must actually work on something that is useful and can help.
Yeah, but the other aspects on that are, one, your governments would just, like spies, they would just have secret researchers working on the unethical stuff. Two, it could be quite hard to control whether or not the stuff is whether you're publishing on ethical or non-ethical or even borderline. I mean, if you're publishing on borderline stuff, kind of how do you decide?
But
also, yeah, it's an interesting idea, and in theory it would be good. But another thing, that if you can't publish on areas that interest you, or like your research is restricted, similar to how like the dark web has popped up, you'll likely get a sort of dark research network.
I hear what you're saying, but now
dark
the question comes in: how will you apply ethics then? Like, if you can't force it upon people,
that's another thing.
I think I generally think that we have to be very flexible regarding ethics. I mean, our ethical knowledge and our morale constantly changes. Like in the 20s, it was ethical to conduct experiments in the era of eugenics, like in race biology and things like that. And now we have updated knowledge of what our morale actually is. So I mean, it would be a good idea to, and what we're trying to do is to kind of guide research in the right direction. But that has kind of two requirements. One is that it's very flexible, and two is that research, the guiding research, the one providing guidance, has to be way more kind of in the forefront than the actual research. It has to be 50 years ahead. It has to be almost 100 years ahead to be able to see in which direction we should kind of steer the boat.
Like when quantum computing and AGI kind of never mind.
I feel like you're putting a lot of faith in quantum computing.
I think
that's just a side note. But just going back to the whole ethics thing, it is partially being implemented because there's the whole, okay, I don't publish or work in fields that need ethical clearance, but like I know here at University of Pretoria, for certain topics, like if you're using data related to people, or like any medical data, even if it's completely anonymous medical data that's been made freely available online, you have to go and get ethical clearance before you can actually do research on that using that data. Erik, you may be able to give more insight in terms of how publishing in academia deals with that, if they have the same requirements.
Yeah, like ethics in research is widely applied. Like we're definitely not saying that. Like ethics in research is used every day. If you're doing animal experiments, you have to do ethics statements, and almost using any type of data related to people, as you say, you have to have ethics statements. Even when regards to like research in the forefront, you will have to have ethics statements regarding how this research can be used. So ethics is widely applied. But what we're saying is that there's some fields that are so full of risk, like you identified artificial intelligence and biotechnology, that we don't just need ethical statements on research that are conducted. We also need ethical guidance, because all research is so riskful to even conduct. I can give you some examples of this. One example I can give you is kind of related to physics, and it's the nuclear bomb. Like if we would have an ethical establishment by then, and if we would have listened to the researchers in Los Alamos who actually said that this shouldn't be conducted, then we wouldn't have had nuclear weaponry by now, or at least not widespread. One other example I can give you is the modification of the bird flu virus H5N1. So the bird flu virus is is very deadly. It has about a 60% mortality rate, but it's not really contagious. So in 2011, a bunch of researchers with totally benign intent decided to see what it would take for this bird flu virus to actually become intermammalian contagious. So they wanted to see what would it take in nature for this to mutate into a very, very contagious virus for humans. And so they used kind of genetic editing and synthetic biology to actually create this virus. And they published their work creating a highly contagious, highly deadly virus. And the research was, and the kind of everyone in the research world was like, what are you doing? Like, you can't do research like this. And this was just 9 years ago that it was published, and it was taken off PubMed, it was taken out of journals, and everything was kind of classified. Right now you can't find anything about it. That it's like research like this that we have to kind of steer the boat, because this can be so lethal to all intelligent life on Earth.
But if I can just make a comment on that specifically, I'm not saying that this was their point of view, but one way of looking at, or one potential reason for them doing that research was to find out, see what processes are involved or need to happen for that transition to be able to take place, so that kind of when there are new viruses discovered, we can monitor them and see if those mutations occur and be prepared for it. And that links to another point I wanted to make, Llewellyn, about your ethics. It's obviously not always the case, but there could be cases where unethical research gives people ideas for more beneficial research. I'm not sure if it worked this way, but just going back to the atomic bomb, I don't know if maybe if nuclear reactors came out of the atomic bomb research. I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure which came first there, but so I mean that would be an example of unethical research leading to beneficial, hugely beneficial research.
Like the application of it depends on the person who is using it. But
at what price?
We are just exploring what is possible, how the world works, and that can be used for good or bad. But my question really was like, just can we force ethics, in research? But it's actually the answer is no. You can't force it, because research is research. It kind of has to happen. The ethics needs to take place in the where do you apply this research? And that's how I understand it. You guys can correct me, but
a better thing to ask, rather than can we enforce ethics on research, is how do we enforce ethics on the application of research?
Exactly. We are almost out of time, actually. I think we are out of time.
And we haven't even really gotten to my theories on AGI.
There's a lot to discuss. I mean, this is actually, it's difficult because we are really talking like we're flowing. But Erik, once again, thank you so much for joining and giving your opinions and just being part of this. We appreciate it. It was well worth our time. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I think this was a great discussion, kind of concluding what synthetic biology and biotech can imply in AI and vice versa. And I think you guys got to a great kind of knowledge base of now you have an idea of what biotech is and synthetic biology. So I'm glad that I can have. I'm glad that I've attributed with something, and I'm so happy with what you learned me as well. So I'm very grateful.
This was very, very interesting and worthwhile discussion for me. So thank you very much for taking the time to discuss with us,
engage with us,
and share your insight and knowledge.
Okay. I'm gonna stop.